I think when I was in high school, one of my friends had a record collection, and I used to go by his house because he was an avid collector of albums, and they were primarily albums by all of the greats: Sonny Stitt, of course, Charlie Parker, and he purchased one. I think when I was like 16, and he lived up on the top of a house, so that when he was playing his music, he was up on he lived up in the attic, and he had a small space, and it was cool for him, and so he would leave the door open for me so I could just go in and listen. So after I would finish my high school studies at the school, I would catch the bus and go to his house. And one day when I came in, he had a special one with a little note on the bed that I should listen to Tenor Madness. And I think that's when I really started getting into listening to Sonny. But I had heard Sonny before that with Miles. And at my high school, they had like a soda fountain, and they had a jukebox. And on the jukebox, they had some Miles Davis recordings. And one of them was a recording called Paper Moon. And that was the one that I listened to with all my bus fare to get home. I had to walk home because I was listening to Sonny playing with Miles. And I was listening to just his sound. And at that time, he had a squeak. So I didn't know. I thought that was part of what you were supposed to do, if you were playing like that. I just listened to it over and over. And I finally realized that was something that was maybe not supposed to be there, but at that point, he had a squeak. So, I copied everything that I could. Remember, I didn't sit down and transcribe it, but I listened to it enough to memorize it in my head, and then I would try to play it.
Yeah.
Then fast forward, I got to listen to more of his work on recordings, and then when I was 19 or 20, like 1957, I think that's when he formed his group with Don Cherry and Billy Higgins and Bob Cranshaw. Was that 57?
No, it was later than that.
59, maybe.
Was that after the Bridge Group or before the Bridge Group?
This is before the Bridge Group.
So I think it would be 60 maybe. But I don't know. I can't.
Yeah, you're about right. Yeah, I think you're about right. Yeah, it was 1960. He actually came to Detroit. There was a painter, a man by the name of
Prophet Jennings.
Prophet Jennings, right? And Sonny and Prophet were good friends. Sonny was also at that time, I think, just coming back from his sabbatical. This is when he had his Mohican haircut. And so Prophet organized a concert in Detroit, and that was combined with Prophet's artwork. So there were paintings around the stage of all these great people that he had painted. Billie Holiday, I think he had one of Lester Young, he had several of them. And he had them in a semicircle. And inside the circle, that's where we set up with a local band. I played with a guy named Teddy Harris, who at one point was one of Aretha Franklin's music directors. But Teddy was one of my mentors, and he would sit down and transcribe things from record and invite a certain group of guys to come over to his house, and we would learn those tunes. And so that particular evening, we opened for Sonny.
Wow.
So of course I was, we were really nervous, just knowing that he was in the facility, but we played our set, which really went well. It went pretty well. We played about 3 or 4 tunes, and then after we finished, I got my horn case and I was packing up, and there's a guy who's standing there smiling at me, and he said, "Hey man, do you know Nuke?" So I knew that was Sonny's nickname. So I said, "No, I haven't met him." This guy that's standing there smiling is Billy Higgins.
That's why I was smiling.
Yeah, smiling Billy Higgins. And so he said, "Well, pack up your stuff. Come with me." So I packed up my horn, and I had my horn in my right hand, and Billy held my left hand and walked me back into the dressing room where Sonny was. And he came in the door, and he told Sonny, he said, "Sonny, this is Bennie." And that was it. And he welcomed me, and he says, "Yeah, man, I heard you out there, man. You sound good. What's happening?" So that was the beginning of our dialogues, And he says, "Well, the main thing is just mean what you play, and keep working at it, and everything will be fine." He says, "You got any gigs you playing?" I said, "Well, I got this one tonight." He said, "This is good. I'm glad you're here. This is really nice." So we had that as a first conversation, and then the band went on and they played, and it was incredible with Don Cherry and Billy and
that was an outrageous band, man. I mean, wow, Don Cherry and Sonny Rollins together. Who would have thunk it, Yeah.
I mean, no piano, no guitar. And they just played all these great tunes, and it was for me, it was just like being in another dimension or something, being able to hear him live in that room. The sound was brilliant, and he looked fantastic. He was so healthy, with Mohican haircut. Everybody was quite taken back by that. And so, after the concert was over, I went back in the dressing room, and he was there. I talked to him and told him how much I enjoyed it. He said, "So, thank you very much." He was very humble the way he is. And he says, "I'm going to come back to Detroit. We're gonna come back, and we're gonna play it at a place called the Minor Key." He asked me if I knew that place, and I did, because everybody that came to Detroit, most of the guys, they played the Minor Key, because that was the main room. So I'd heard Art Blakey and Sly Hampton and Miles and everybody. So Sonny says, "We're going to come back, and we're going to actually play there for 2 weeks," which was unusual. He says, "Yeah, I'm getting ready to do some recording, and I really want to work through the music." And so I said, "Okay." He said, "Yeah, when I come back, you have to find out where I am and call me up. He said, maybe I can help you out." And sure enough, when they got back, I went the first night, and they sounded better than they had the first night that I heard them. I mean, it was like, really, it was amazing what they were doing. And, then on the break, I told him that, I was free during the day. He says, "Yeah, come on by my place." And he said, "I'm just there, come by and practice with me, or just come and hang out with me. I'm just practicing during the day." So I went by where he was staying, which wasn't too far from where I was living. And, as I was getting out of my car and everything, I could hear him in the hotel. He was practicing, man. It just sounded so great. So I just listened. And finally, he took a little break, and I knocked on the door, and I came in. And at that time, Sonny was eating a lot of raw carrots. he had a big bag of raw carrots on the bed, and he had a bar that he was using, and he was doing these what they call isometric exercises to gain, to do his strength. So he introduced me to the isometric exercise and told me that it was basically built on dynamic tension, and that it would help you to build your strength. So I said, "Oh, okay." And then he says, "Well, what are you working on?" I said, "Well, I'm just mainly working on my sound and getting my hands together." And so I had my horn and everything. He said, "Yeah, take out your horn." And I played a little bit for him, and then he says, "You like that mouthpiece you're playing on?" So I said, "Yeah, I kind of like it." So he said, "Well, here, try this one." He gave me another mouthpiece. I played on it, and I could hardly get a sound out of it. He said, "Oh." And I said, "Yeah, it seems like it's a little bit too open for me." He said, "But, take it with you, take it with you and try it." And it was just happening around that same time that I got one of my very first multiple night gigs where I was playing like 4 nights a week with a guy who played blues and basically some of the pop tunes of the day. That was it. And with him, he was saying, "Look, I don't want any," he says, "I know you can play, but I don't want any of that far out stuff that I know you guys play. It's just play my music and come in and look respectable when you come into my job, and we'll get along just fine." So, I learned his music, and I struggled with that mouthpiece on the gig. I was going back and forth because I had that mouthpiece that Sonny had given me. Then I had the one that I had been playing on, and I worked on it. I worked on it for the first week, and I was just struggling with it. So he gave me another one. He said, "Well, try this one." And that one was a little bit more friendly. So then I did my gig that weekend, but I would get off from my gig early enough for me to go by and listen to them. So I got to hear them every night. It was really quite amazing, just how the music flowed, and how hearing music without a piano or a guitar, that was a first for me. But in listening to it, I started to realize that Bob was the harmonic element, and that he and Sonny, they had all of that covered, because sometimes Sonny would play bass lines. He would play the bass lines. I said, "Wow, that's it." And I talked to him. He says, "Yeah, you have to learn the bass lines, so that you know where you are in the form of the tune." And that was a great 2 weeks for me. It was like unlike anything else that I had experienced. But
it's almost as if he assumed the role of mentor, of master, and you were the pupil.
Absolutely. And by the end of the 2 weeks, I had kind of gotten a grip on the second mouthpiece he gave me, which wasn't quite so big. He said, "Well, you got to try different things, try different reeds, try a different mouthpiece." And he said, "Mostly just practice long tones a lot, so you can really develop your tone qualities. You got a good tone, you got a good sound, but it can always be better. So just work on it, And after that, I was pretty set in a lot of ways, having had the opportunity to listen to him in that room, small room, listening to him for 2 weeks, and then going by the hotel, hanging with him, checking out what he was working on. He was studying a lot. He was reading his book, dealt with the Rosicrucians. So he was into a very, spiritual path. Was always asking me about Yusef. He said, "Where's Yusef?" So I think he spent some time with Yusef because they were good friends. And, it's just like a tremendous opportunity to have that as a way to meet him, so I could see who he was as a musician and get a feeling for who he was as a person, which really gave me a lot of insight, and what you have to do. Yeah, you got to really work hard. He said, "Yeah, I'm working on this. And, it's coming together, but it's not quite what I want." It's just never satisfied. So, fast forward, 1962, I get a gig with the Four Tops, and it's my first gig going on the road. Piano player, a guy named Johnny Griffin. Everybody thinks about the saxophone player, but this pianist was like one of the main guys who did the major recording sessions for Motown. Johnny Griffin was well-trained pianist. He could play blues. Of course, he played all the gospel music because that was a very major part of playing, piano and organ and things like that. And so his sister and I gone to high school. He told her that he was looking for a saxophone player. And she had heard me somewhere. She said, "Well, you should call my friend." So he called me. And I went over to his house and he asked for music. And he said, "I want you to play something for me." He put the music in front of me. And by then I could sight read. I sight read the music and played through the chord changes. And he said, "Okay." Then he gave me another one. I think he had 2-3 tunes that he wanted me to play. And he said, "Yeah." He says, "These tunes are easy." He says, "Basically, we just play background stuff and a little bit of solos in between before the tops come on the stage. And then we'll play the first tune to start the evening. And then, that's it." But, we're getting ready to go to Atlantic City. And we're going to play upstate New York in the Borscht Belt, or a place called Laurels and Grossinger's and those joints. We played in a place called 500, Club 500.
Atlantic City?
Atlantic City. And, those were the joints we played.
Wow.
And then then we had some time off between playing up in the Catskills before we actually played in Atlantic City. So these guys, they already had been to New York and they had friends and, they had associates. So they said, "Well, what we're going to do, we're going to get you a hotel and, we're going to be off for like 2 days, maybe about 2-3 days. And then we'll come back and pick you up." They gave me some money, so they said, "Have a good time." I mean, this is my first time ever in New York, right? So I'm just like, wow, I'm fascinated by the smell, the noise, the sounds, I mean, everything about it. I'm just out there. And the rhythm section guys, they already had their thing, so I didn't really hang with them. But I was just walking around, and I walked down on East 4th Street, and I found this club called the Five Spot, and discovered that night, Thelonious Monk was going to be playing in the Five Spot. So I just continued my walking around. I knew where I was going to be that night. I walked around until about 8, eating New York pizza and just checking out the city, just getting through it, And at night I went back to the Five Spot. I got there before everything started, got me a table so I could see the band and see Monk and hear the music, and I stayed all night. And it was that night that I got to see a lot of musicians that I'd only seen like in Downbeat magazine and on the record album covers. And I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden it was just like this influx of these great people standing at the bar and sitting and listening to Monk. Monk had John Orr, he had Charlie Rouse, And I think not Danny Richmond.
And Riley?
No, it wasn't Riley. It was another drummer before that. I can't remember this guy's name, but it'll come back to me. But anyway, I just sat there and I was fascinated, just because I didn't realize what a tall guy he was. I mean, he would just get up and light a cigarette, twirl around and kind of dance because there was an area that was right next to the sidewalk with windows. So if you were out on the street, you could look into the club and you could see Monk sitting at the piano. And wow, that was just one of the most fascinating nights of my life. And I was sitting there and, I had an epiphany. I said, I'm going to live here because this is where everybody lives. All the great guys live here. If I don't live here, then I'm never going to know much about the music. And by that time, Motown was starting to blow up. So a lot of guys I knew, they were starting to get those gigs because they were starting to tour with Martha and the Vandellas and, Smokey and the Miracles and all that kind of stuff. So when the Tops came back to pick me up, they were curious. They said, well, man, what did you do? Did you meet any girls? I said, no, not one. I said, well, what did you do? I said, I went to hear Thelonious Monk. And they were in shock. They said, what? We would have loved to have heard that. I said, well, he just played around the corner here at this place called Pocket. I said, well, what do you think of New York? I said, I love New York. And I'm giving you my notice. I'm going to work 2 more weeks. And then that's it. I'm going to live here in New York. They just kind of looked at me. So I said, okay. So we blasted on off, went up to the Catskills, did our gigs. Last show starts at 2 a.m. And, people are sauced to the hilt. They are very, very drunk and having a very good time all night long. And so we played there. We played there actually for 2 weeks. And it was really cool because during the day, it was beautiful during the day. It's so lovely up there. So I just stayed in my room and practiced and walked around and checked out the countryside, But then after the gig was over, they paid me off. And I said, okay. And I went back to Detroit and I stayed for a week because I had some unfinished business. And then I caught a Greyhound from Detroit. And I went to New York and I celebrated my 22nd birthday in New York. I didn't really know anybody.
Wow.
But, I found a Y. So then you could stay at the YMCA. So I had a little cash, so I stayed in the Y. And I just walked around the city and I found some of my friends who were already there from Detroit. But, they were kind of ahead of me in that regard. So I didn't really hang out with them that much. And so after the first week I was there, I sort of chimed into the city itself, what it was, and I was starting to be pretty broke. So I called my father and I asked him for some money. He says, yeah, I'm going to send you some. He says, but this is all I'm going to send you. So I said, that's fine. I'll send it back. And, that next week I went out and I went to the New York Employment Office. And this young guy, he interviewed me. He says, well, how did you happen to end up here in New York? You're from Detroit. I said, well, I came here with a band and I decided that I would stay here because I just think that I stand a better chance of developing if I'm here where everybody lives, He said, oh, I see. He said, but what else have you done to make money? I said, well, I just spent a year working in the hospital taking care of research animals. And he said, oh, really? He looked at me, he said, do you know how to take care of research animals? I said, yeah, when I worked in the hospital, my job was to take care of them after they had surgical procedures. And, I had actually been invited to go to the Society of Prevention of Cruelty to Animals, because federal government at that time, they offered these programs for people who wanted to study animal husbandry and could possibly go on and become a veterinarian. So, they said, well, come and take the first segment of it, and this is after I got the job. I got the job, by the way. I went for my interview. I go up and I meet this incredible guy. His name is Dr. Swartz. I'll never forget him. And Dr. Swartz invited me into his office. He says, well, tell me about yourself. What do you do? I told him, I said, well, I'm a musician, but I want to live here in New York, so I need a job. And then I told him that I spent, a year or so taking care of research animals while I was going to music conservatory. He said, oh, yeah. I said, okay. He said, well, when I started at this hospital, I started as a janitor. My people migrated from Europe here. And he said, I came from a really poor family, but I started as a janitor and I worked my way through medical school. And he said, I think it's really interesting that you're here and you want to be a musician and you've done this work with the animals. I said, yeah, I've done it. I said, okay, the job is yours. So I had a job. So that job enabled me to take private lessons. I had an apartment. I stayed with some of my friends, which lasted not too long because I needed to have my own space. So I ended up with a space on 10th Street between Avenue C and D. And then one night, again, I'm walking down past the 5 spots, and there's Sonny. He had just played, and he turned around, and I was looking in the window, and we just locked eyes, and he looked at me, and I could tell he was pointing at me, and he said, Bennie. And that's when I saw him again, And so at some point we connected, and that's when I really got to spend time with him. After I would work, Sonny would drive over and pick me up. And he knew these places over in New Jersey where they're probably populated now, but during those times, they weren't. They were just like forest areas. And he would say, yeah, he says, I go over to these places and practice because I can't do it in my apartment buildings. And my neighbors would be really upset. It's because I played for long periods of time. So he would take me over there. And he would go off the road up into these areas, and we would stand outside in the dark and practice together. Mm. And he would play things, and I would ask him, I said, well, what was that you just played? Oh, you like that, huh? I said, here, let me show you what it is. And he would show me stuff. Then I would play something. He says, well, hey, you got to show me that, So we just developed this tremendous rapport, and I just got to hang with him whenever I could, but he was just great. I got to hang with him. I got to spend time with Coltrane as well, but not like with Sonny. I got to practice with Sonny. Yeah, Sonny was Sonny. He would just call me up sometimes out of the blue and say, hey, man, what are you doing? And then one night, he called me up after I'd gone to so many of his gigs. He called me up, and this is when he's having problems with the implants. He's the first person I know who had major problems with the implants. He says, I've had this problem with my teeth, and now I'm going to have surgery. He said, but when I come back, he says, maybe you can come over and help me out on my gig. So I said, Sonny's asked me to come and help him on a gig. So he goes away and he does this whole thing, and then he comes back. He says, well, I talked to Max Gordon at the Vanguard, and he gave me a week. And he said, but I really don't know how I'm going to do. He said, so why don't you come on over? And so I get there. And there's another guy there. That guy turns out to be a good friend of mine, and he's got a tenor. It's Eddie Daniels.
Wow.
So Sonny hired Eddie Daniels and I to play with him. And that was a night I will never forget. He took us through the fire. I mean, and on a break, you know, he was saying, "Oh man, my chops, they just, you know, they really don't feel well." And you know, it's really very. He says, "What do you think of the sound?" He was always asking me about the sound. I mean, to me, I couldn't tell any difference. I mean, it was like he sounded fantastic, and he just, oh man, he wiped us out. So that was night one. Then the second night, Eddie and I came in, and I could see Max was on the phone, and he was talking to Sonny. And then I could overhear him. He was a Sonny. He says, "You gotta come," and I could tell that it didn't sound right, you know. So after it was over, after the conversation was over, Max was standing there and he was saying, "You know, Sonny doesn't feel well, so, you know, he wants you guys to go ahead and just play." So we played, and people were coming in and they were looking for Sonny, right? But it was Eddie and I. So Eddie and I, we just went at it. We played all the tunes that we knew. We traded fours. We played eights. We did all kinds of stuff. And at the end of the night, Max was like totally unhappy. So he didn't say anything, but it didn't go well because people were coming and they were looking for Sonny, and Sonny wasn't there. They were asking for their money back, and they were upset because they really wanted to hear him, you know. So
yeah.
Then the third night, you know, after he let us play for 2 nights, though. He was that cool with us. He let us play for 2 nights, and we did our best, you know. But he says, I can't have you guys here over the weekend. He says, Sonny's not coming back. He just really doesn't feel well. I called him up because I talked to him every day, and he was telling me, you know, what he was going through, how difficult it was. He says, this is taking much longer than I thought, you know, just to be able to get back in shape, to be able to play. So that weekend, Max called Elvin. And Elvin bought one of his groups called the Jazz something, the Jazz Express. I don't know what it was, but it was with Joe Farrow and who else it was, but they took it over. And then it was a while, you know. But that was a very interesting moment to be there with him and to play with him that first night, and to hear that with a rhythm section, great rhythm section with a guy named Albert Daly.
Oh, I love Albert Daly. Yeah,
Albert Daly, Herbie Lewis played bass, and Freddie Wace was playing drums.
Wow!
So it was a phenomenal rhythm section.
Yeah,
and you know, Sonny was so cohesive, man. Thank you for going and doing the gig. It's just, I'm sorry that I couldn't come back. He said, but I just couldn't come back. And then, you know, for quite some time after that, he didn't come out and play because he was going through this thing, and then I think they had to take everything out, and then they had to put it back in. I think they did that at least once that I can remember. You know, and we went through the healing process, and he came back. And then, you know, after that, he never went away again. He was out, he was touring, you know, so I always went to hear him, you know, and call him up. He was always checking on me, what are you doing? And, you know, how you doing? Are you playing? Are you making any money? Yeah. So I said, yeah, I'll make a little bit. He said, it's good. He said, just keep going. He was always like that with me, you know. And then he came back to the Vanguard again. But by now, everything had healed up pretty well, and I think that he had gotten to a point where he felt more comfortable with the transplant. And it just was just magnificent, you know, just was so great, and so gracious to me, just encouraged me so much, you know. And that's how our relationship has been throughout all these years. That was started like when I was, 19 or 20, right up to the present. So, of course, I knew Lucille. And whenever I lived up in Brooklyn for a while, and Sonny would come, Lucille would come, and at the end of the night, I remember one night it was brutal in New York. It was so cold, and at the end of the night, you know, Sonny was saying, "Well, where are you going, man?" I said, "Well, I'm going back to where I live." He said, "Where? You going to Brooklyn?" He said, No. Get in the car. I'll take you." They took me home. They drove me all the way to Brooklyn. Took me home. Yeah, they were like my parents in a certain way. Yeah, they really were. Yeah, and then you know, things started to really improve a lot for me because I started to really work more, started to get more gigs, and you know, started to play with a lot of different people. Started playing in situations that were really good for me, and I got a really great gig finally. I got one of the first really important gigs was working with Roy Haynes, and the pianist was McCoy Tyner. He had left Coltrane by then, and a guy named Scotty Hope, who was a bass player. Scotty was from Chicago, so Roy actually gave me one of my first really important gigs, and of all places, it was in the 5-spot.
Wow.
And the gig was supposed to be a quintet with Charles Tolliver, because Charles and I had become like a front line. So when the composers wanted to have a quintet, we had this reputation. We'd come and sight read your music and play it right. So we had great opportunities to play with McCoy and, you know, with his band. But he was supposed to play this gig with Roy Haynes. But he couldn't do it because he was out here on the West Coast doing a big band recording with the great Gerald Wilson. So it ended up being a quartet, which scared me half to death, you know. But after the first set, Roy Haynes took me back into the kitchen, and he looked at me, and he gave me this look, and he said, "What's wrong with you?" And you know, and I could tell that he was not so happy with the fact that I wasn't really playing. He said, "I know you can play more." He said, "Go ahead, be yourself." So I said, "Okay," and that was it. That was the end of it. And I came back and I played, and then during the break, McCoy asked me if I had any tunes. He said, "Well, bring some of your tunes. We'll play some of your tunes." So I brought the tunes. McCoy played my tunes to show me how they could be, and we played some of my music. But I played an entire week in the 5-spot with Roy Haynes and the quartet. That changed everything for me because it was my gig.
Yeah.
You know, and so by then I had an opportunity to play with Kenny Durham. I got a call from McCoy to record on Tender Moments, and then we got another call from Horace Silver for an audition, and I went and I did the audition, but I didn't get the gig. A guy named Tyrone Washington got it. He was good friends with Woody Shaw because Woody was playing, and Joe Henderson had left, and they were looking for another tenor player. So I didn't get it. But it was okay because I worked with McCoy. I got to play with Kenny Durham. Cedar Walton wrote a bunch of great music. I would play with him and Billy Higgins and whoever was playing bass. And I would play their music. And then I had my regular routine of practicing 4 or 5 hours a day and making an effort to try to, you know, write some tunes and hang out with Charles and play his tunes. And, you know, about a year went past and Horace called me again. By then, it's 1968. And this time I went to audition, and he hired me. And we recorded a thing called You Gotta Take a Little Love. That was the name of the CD, the recording. I was on half of it, and Stanley Turrentine was on the other half. But then I worked with Horace for a year and a half. But during that time, I also got to record with Lee Morgan, on Blue Note, with Andrew Hill, you know. But I say all of this to say that Sonny was the one who really gave me what I needed in terms of support to, you know, just work to develop my confidence. You know, he would always tell me, well, Dean and John would always say, hey, man, you know, your time is going to come. Just, you know, stay clean. Don't develop any nasty habits, you know, and everything will be cool. So one thing led to another, and so he calls me up, and he says, I want you to come and do a recording with me. That's when he was on Fantasy. So I got to record with him on one that he called The Nucleus. Yeah, got to record on Nucleus up with George Duke and, oh, wow, who else was it? Another guy, and I met Mark Soskin. I got to connect with Mark Soskin. And, you know, that was a really big thing for me, that I get to record Sonny Rollins.
Yeah.
And we had talked a lot about doing something, but it just didn't work out. And we were actually able to do it, you know. But through the years, you know, our conversations and the periods have been really some of the most important dialogues that I had were with Sonny, and also with Coltrane, because I met Coltrane before I met Sonny. I met Coltrane when I was like 18, because he used to come to Detroit after he left Miles, and he would always hang out with the local guys in Detroit. And whenever he was at somebody's house, the word would spread. Train is going to be at a guy named Joe Brazil's house, you know. And everybody would converge on the house. About 3 o'clock, John would show up. And they would play sometimes till the sun came up. After playing all night, he would come and play some more. But, you know, that example of Sonny and John really, they enabled me to realize, you know, that this is not something that you have to take lightly. You have to be really serious about what you do, you know. And so after I played with Horace, I got a gig with Lee Morgan. And we recorded live at the Lighthouse and those things. And I really loved that gig. Then after that, I got a call with them, you know, from Herbie. And I remember one night we were playing with the Headhunters down in the village somewhere, and Sonny and Lucille came. It was really a great night, you know. But he was there cheering us on. He said, "Yeah, you guys sound great. You know, keep up the good work." That kind of thing, you know. It's just, you know, gave me a lot of the kind of encouragement that you need sometimes, I think, when you're, you know, fighting to make your way.
Have you had any contact with him in recent years?
Any what?
Contact with him in recent years.
Yeah, I went to see him last year. Yeah, I went to see him. It was around the same time as Jack DeJohnette's birthday. Yeah, so I got to stay at his house with him, and, you know, spend time talking to him, reading some of the things from his incredible library, and you know, that was really good. It was just great to see him at this stage of his life, you know, where he is. just where he was at. He said, well, I'm just working to learn something every day. Because that's what I'm doing, So I call him. In fact, I definitely have to call him after we finish our conversation and let him know that I spoke to you. But the influence of him, like I said, not only as a musician but as a person, is really just enabled me to move forward, especially during the challenging times. During the challenging times when I would call him up and he said, "Oh, you'll be fine. Just do what you do and do your best."
With a mentor like Sonny and people like Miles Davis and John Coltrane and all these people in your life, have you been able to find young people to share your wisdom with?
That's what I do now. Because I realize that it's like whatever it is that I've gained from them, it's important that I pass it on. And so now a lot of the young guys that I meet, they've heard the recordings and they know about things with Miles and Herbie and all that stuff. So they're always, looking for me. And I go to wherever they play. I go to them. I'm on the faculty now of Cal Arts, which is where actually Charlie Hayden actually started the jazz department. So now I'm on that faculty. And Wadada Leo Smith was there for many years, and he retired a few years ago. But so I get to work with musicians every week. Every semester I have a different group that I work with, and I take my lead from them. I ask them, what is it? Why did you choose my ensemble to be a part of? And they all want to know. Well, we want to know, what was it like to do this? What was it like to do that? Well, those are great experiences. And to have had the opportunity to spend time with Sonny and Trey and Miles and to gain from them. I said, well, you gain something from everyone. I said, there are a lot of musicians that you may never even have heard of. And I've gained something from everyone that I've ever met. And I've been able to, mention their names whenever I do interviews and things like that. So now there's a real movement here, I think, and there's an abundance of young musicians who are really studying and playing extremely well. I just talked a few nights ago with Bob Mensa because he invites me to come down to USC to meet them. So I get down there and I meet them. I hang with them. Sometimes I go down to the campus and look at a practice room, and I'll go by and practice with someone. And we'll play some of their tunes, some of their original music, But some of the guys who grew up in LA, they're starting to come back because they went to school in New York. Isamu McGregor?
No, I don't know.
He's a pianist and a composer. He went to Manhattan. And then Gerald Clayton. His father stays right down the street from me. That's where their family home is. When I come out of my house, if I lost my brakes, I could run into their front door. So, I'm just right here with them. I don't see them that often, but these guys are starting to come back. But I said all of that to say is that there are more listening rooms for the first time since I've lived here. There's this place called the Blue Whale that you came to. There's another one now called, they have a series called Just Jazz, and they're playing like on Wednesday nights. Some other rooms around where some of the musicians are taking the initiative and they just find a space and talk to the owners and say, hey man, can we just come and have a jam session on a certain night? And they come and they bring their friends. So many of them are building their own audiences in some of these rooms where there's, possibilities to play. So I think that's really healthy. And they're writing good and they're playing good. So that's kind of an exciting thing for me, because when I got here, a lot of the guys who were around, they were also session guys. And they would do the jam sessions and things like that, but their focus was on the music that they grew up on, which is primarily bebop. And so, a lot of those guys, they're not even around anymore. They don't play. They're retired. Some of them have passed on. So it's a whole new crop of young guys who are coming up. They're coming out of USC. They're coming out of UCLA. A lot of the guys having so much difficulty in New York, and they're coming out here because, they can hustle some gigs here. I don't know what's happening up the Bay Area, but they're just finding ways to make it happen for themselves. So I just got a invitation from some guys over in Belgium to come and be featured as a featured guest with their band. So things are different now, and moving around to wherever the music is what I'm more interested in doing. Like here, if you do a recording, it's locked into some kind of a format. They want you to do a certain kind of thing. So I'm not looking for that. But the guys over in Belgium, they send me some of their music, and I listen to it, and it's great because it's a reflection of how they are. These guys are like in their 20s, and they're not trying to play anything. They're not trying to emulate anything. I mean, what they're doing, they're really experimenting, coming up with some great stuff. Young guy who's a drummer, he came over, and I think he went to the new school for a while. But so I'm starting to meet the young ones, and I just share what I have to share with them, and encourage them just to move on with it, and to pay attention to those recordings, and go back as far as they can go, so that they can hear what the masters have left for us, and take those things and build on it. Don't cross it out as something that has no value. In order to extend on a language, you have to know the roots of the language. Yeah. And every week there's something happening at the Blue Well. I'll go down there, there'll be a group of guys, and they're playing great. Sometimes I go and my intentions are to stay for the first set so I can come home because I get up real early to exercise in the morning, and I'll end up staying all night. Just so I can say hello to them and meet them.
Yeah.
And meet them, because a lot of them, they know me from recordings, but I don't play that much here in LA. So it's up to me to go and meet them. And I feel like, that's part of my mission now, to go and introduce myself to them, because they always want to hang out. Man, we're gonna come over and practice with you. I say, well, sometimes I don't practice. You're asleep when I'm practicing. I'm practicing at 3 o'clock in the morning, and then at 6 o'clock I'm up and I'm going to do my workout. I work out every day of the week except Sunday. So we'll get together. So now I'm meeting so many of them, I'm thinking more and more about forming a large ensemble. Because I heard a group about a week ago, and they were awesome. the trombonist, everybody could play and everybody could write. So, I think that it's time to take some of my music and some of the music that I've been involved with and formulate it, for a large ensemble, like a big band or something. Just so that there's another outlet. Because of the guys who don't get to go to USC or Cal Arts, a lot of times they don't get the skills. And I feel that I need to introduce them to the guys who are going to school so that those guys can share their skills with them.